The bell above the diner door jingled softly as Frank Miller, 81 years old and proud, stepped inside. Betty's Roadside Diner, a cozy spot on the outskirts of a small Oregon town. The place smelled of bacon grease and hot coffee, the kind of scent that wrapped around you like an old blanket. Frank wore his faded Vietnam veteran cap and his denim jacket patched with stories of another lifetime. "Morning, Frank," called Betty, the owner, from behind the counter. "Morning, sweetheart," Frank smiled, easing himself into his usual seat by the window. Rain tapped gently against the glass as a soft country tune played from the jukebox. Across the diner sat three young men, loud, cocky, and full of themselves. They were truck stop drifters, the kind who carried trouble like a shadow. One of them, a tall, muscular man named Chad, glanced over at Frank and smirked. "Hey, old man," Chad called out. "What's with the war hat? You trying to impress someone?" Frank ignored him, focusing on his coffee, but Chad wasn't done. He got up, swaggered across the diner, and leaned on Frank's table. "Come on, Grandpa, tell us. How many people you kill over there?" The air went still. Even the jukebox seemed to quiet down. Frank's voice was calm, low, the kind that came from someone who'd seen too much. "Enough," he said, "to keep punks like you free to run your mouths." Laughter erupted from Chad's friends, but not from him. His pride couldn't take the sting of those words. Before anyone could stop him, Chad snapped his hand across Frank's face. The sharp sound echoed through the diner. Betty gasped. Coffee spilled. Frank didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on Chad's, calm, fearless, unbroken. "Son," Frank said quietly, dabbing his lip with a napkin, "you just made a big mistake." The thug laughed nervously. "What's an old man like you gonna do?" Frank simply leaned back, a faint smile ghosting his lips. "Not me," he murmured. "But someone's coming." Outside, faintly through the rain, came a sound, distant but growing, and the low, thunderous rumble of motorcycles. The thug turned his head toward the diner's fogged windows. As the rumbling grew louder, deep, guttural, powerful, one engine became three, then five, then a whole pack roaring like thunder rolling over asphalt. The sound made the glasses on the counter tremble. Betty peeked outside. "Oh, my Lord," she whispered. Through the sheets of rain, the parking lot filled with Harleys, black, chrome, and roaring. The men who stepped off them wore heavy leather jackets, their backs marked with the unmistakable Hell's Angels patch, a skull with wings and fire. Every eye in the diner widened, including Chad's. He swallowed hard, his smirk gone. The diner door swung open, the little bell barely heard over the growl of engines outside. In walked a man in his 40s, tall, broad-shouldered, tattooed arms visible beneath his jacket. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold but focused. "Hey, Pop," he said, his voice deep, steady, commanding. "You okay?" Frank turned slowly in his seat, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I'm fine, Jack," he said. "Just a small misunderstanding." Jack Miller, Frank's son, looked from his father to Chad, then to the red handprint still visible on Frank's cheek. His jaw tightened. "A misunderstanding, huh?" The bikers stepped inside, filling the small diner with leather, boots, and presents. Rainwater dripped from their jackets onto the linoleum floor. The air smelled of gasoline and steel. Chad backed up until he hit the counter. "I didn't mean anything. Just a joke," he stammered. One of the bikers, a giant of a man with a beard down to his chest, chuckled darkly. "Didn't sound like a joke to me." Jack stepped forward, placing a hand on his father's shoulder. "You did your time for this country," he said softly. Then his voice turned to steel. "Nobody disrespects that." The engines outside kept idling, the sound vibrating through the glass in like a storm waiting to break. The diner was silent, except for the rumble of Harleys outside and the nervous breathing of the thug who'd gone too far. Chad looked like a man caught in his own nightmare. The Hell's Angels stood around him, arms crossed, boots heavy on the floor. Jack stared at him, not with rage, but with the kind of authority that came from both love and war. "You slapped my father," he said quietly. "A man who's fought for this country longer than you've been alive." Chad shook his head. "I didn't know, man. I swear I didn't know." Jack took a step closer until their faces were inches apart. "Then now's your lesson." The room's tension could have snapped glass. One biker doc leaned over to Betty and said with a grin, "Don't worry, ma'am. We don't do violence in public, not unless it's earned." Jack nodded toward Chad. "Apologize." The thug hesitated, his voice trembling. "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean no disrespect." Frank looked up from his coffee cup, eyes gentle again. "It's all right, son. Just remember, respect is something a man carries everywhere he goes." Jack's voice softened. "And if you ever see another vet, you shake his hand. You understand me?" Chad nodded quickly, almost shaking. Yes, sir." The bikers exchanged nods, satisfied. Jack helped his father stand. The two men walked slowly to the door. As they stepped outside, the roar of the engines grew again. The Hells Angels mounted their bikes, the rain breaking into mist around them. Frank turned back to look through the diner window one last time, at the stunned faces, at the silence left behind. He smiled faintly. "You raised good men, Pop," Jack said as he helped his father onto his bike. Frank chuckled. "Guess I taught him something about loyalty." The engines thundered to life, shaking the diner windows as they rode away together. A father, his son, and a brotherhood bound by respect, not fear. Behind them, Chad sat in silence, staring at the veteran's empty coffee cup, and realizing that some men command respect without ever needing to raise a hand.